a fair summary of where we're at. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Rhodes, I wish were here. He had as a unique perspective. He said some truly amazing and over-the-top things that were quoted in the New York Times. I haven't heard anything refute that. One of the ones that I think would concern all of us is this quote that he said on the 4th page of this article, at least as it's printed out, quote, "I don't know anymore where I begin and Obama ends." That's a true, if you really think and let that settle in, that's a truly stunning statement. He also said some other things that I think are very concerning. Quote, "All these newspapers used to have foreign bureaus," which I think he makes a good point on that. Then he says, quote, "Now they don't. They call us to explain to them what's happening in Moscow and Cairo. Most of the outlets are reporting on world events from Washington. The average reporter we talk to is 27 years old, and their only reporting experience consists of being around political campaigns. That's a sea change. They literally know nothing." End quote. He went on to say, Mr. Rhodes said, quote, "But then there are these sorts of force multipliers. We have our compadres. I will reach out to a couple people, and, you know, I wouldn't want to name them." And then he goes on, and anyway, it's really interesting in his approach. But here's that's one component. But you compile that on top of what you also hear former Secretary Panetta said. This is what Secretary Panetta said. This is a quote from Panetta. "And you know my view, talking with the President, was, if I brought it to the point where we had evidence that they're developing an atomic weapon, I think the President is serious, that he is not going to allow that to happen." But then Panetta stops, according to the article, and the author says, quote, "But would you make that same assessment now?" End quote. And Secretary Panetta's quote is, "I would make the same assessment now, question mark? Probably not. Probably not." So he said it once, I've repeated it twice, but this is of what's deep concern. I think it would be naive to just gloss this over and say, hey, we got this deal, it's in the best interest of the United States, it's not something that was fully brought before the Congress. I would hope that we would walk out with an understanding from the three of you of what those big outstanding questions are. But maybe somebody could shed some light on these so-called side deals, these things where Iran has maybe made other deals. Do you have any insight, Mr. Dorn, any of you, on what these so-called side deals might be?
No, and there's what we have uncovered, but as time goes on, we keep finding out more and more that wasn't in the text. And of course, the Obama administration says there is nothing else. But the Iranians are saying that there is a larger deal, in particular with regard to access to dollars and expanding their economy. And the behavior of our officials suggests that they are right. Our officials say that the Iranians are not correct, but here we have Secretary of Kerry in Europe last week, meeting with banks, trying to get them to overlook concerns about Iran's illicit activities and to drum up business for Iran. So there's a mismatch here between what we're saying and what we're doing. But what we're doing actually does match quite closely with what the Iranians are saying, and that's been a characteristic of the deal from day one. The deal has been shaped by the red lines of the Supreme Leader and not by the red lines of the President of the United States. Our red lines have dropped all along the way, and the Iranians have stayed consistent with theirs.
Mr. Rubin?
Very quickly, the JCPOA is almost like a timeshare agreement where you sign the deal and then you'll only find out then what the true costs are. One of the subjects for oversight would be with regard to changing the language restricting Iran's ballistic missile work. Was it a deliberate concession, or was it the result of incompetence? What troubles me mostly is how we seem to be having become Iran's lawyer. For example, the Iranians will now complain that we are not enabling enough openings for their economy, And yet what didn't hit the Western press was last week, the Iranians, on the order of the Supreme Leader, canceled an order, $2 million for Chevrolets. And the answer was, we shouldn't be doing business with the Americans. Who's kneecapping the Iranian economy? Us or the Iranians? It's time to have the Iranians stop blaming other people and take accountability to themselves.
Thank you. My time has expired. Now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much.